1999, I was 10 years old. I used to live in a big city, a nice city, in the countryside of Brazil, named Belo Horizonte. I had a happy life. I used to play soccer in my condominium with a couple of friends. Used to ride my bike into the condominium. And I remember that my father used to come to me in my life and say, Jorge, be very careful when walking in the streets, because you know that near our home there is this favela. It's a community of underprivileged people. Those people out there, you know that they are violent, it's dangerous. Be very careful with that. And as a young boy, I was quite afraid of even coming near to this place. But still, I used to walk 5 to 7 blocks, walk every day in the morning into my school. And every day that I would get out of my home, my father would say, Jorge, be careful. But one day, I got up a little early. And as I was walking down my everyday walk to my school, as I was a little early, I decided to come a little closer to the favela and to have a look for myself. Why should I be afraid? And as I became a little near, I started hearing a lot of noises, and all of a sudden, a couple of kids rushed to me, and they were bearing a knife. And they came to me and said, give me everything that you have, or we'll kill you. And at the time, I was with my backpack, a 10-year-old. And I remember I was completely shocked. But I took all my force, my energy, and I gave it to them. And they immediately ran away. And I stood there. Shocking. Frightened. And I remember asking myself either to get back to my home or to go to my school. Eventually I decided to go to my school. And when I got there, my teachers, they immediately realized that something went wrong. And I talked to them and I explained what happened. They were also afraid and they called my parents. And I was once again afraid from the reaction of my parents, because for me, my bag, it was all of my resources. And I had my notebook, my books, my diary, which had all of my story. And most important, I had my Game Boy, my Pokemon, which was my main source of entertainment. So I was afraid for my parents' reactions. But then they gave me a hug and they were also very afraid, and they said, how are you, Jorge? And then I told them the story, and they basically said to me, well, you're never walking outside the home again alone. We'll drive you anywhere that you want. And from then on, there will be a line, never to cross, because we'll never want that to happen again. And I remember that as they were driving me to my school and to everywhere, I was looking into the favelas, because actually in the city there was like a line between us, those who have and those who have not. And I remember looking in the window of the car that I could see that those boys out there, they were actually pretty much like me. They were playing soccer. I could see they were smiling. Of course, the situation there was pretty bad. There was a lot of trash. They didn't have water treatment. I was asking myself, well, shouldn't they be at school? Probably they were not. But I also asked myself, why did they rob me? What did I do wrong? How could they be so aggressive, so violent? And then I was also thinking, why my parents have this reaction? Why are not they drive me away and created such a separate line? This is a shocking picture. This is a picture from City of God movie, which was nominated for the 2002 Oscars. It is a very realistic movie that shows the reality in Brazil. In Brazil, we are one of the 10 most unequal societies in the world. Just last year, 31,000 people were killed by crime in our country. This is 30 times the average for Europe as a whole in the past 10 years. So it's for my parents, they were pretty much afraid that I could be another case in these statistics. So I understood now, as I grew older, how was the word. But eventually, I grew older, and I had the opportunity to move to São Paulo, which is the biggest city in Latin America, the financial center. I got a law degree. I entered into a big law firm specialized in banking. I got my master's degree. I started working with banking. And then I had one amazing opportunity to participate in the structuring of the first digital bank in Brazil, Nubank. It was amazing to see how financial technology could empower people's financial lives. And that for me was a game changing. I remember that as a lawyer and helping Nubank, I was thinking every day, it's amazing how this really small company, small startup can impact the life of so many people. And one day, I got back to my hometown. It was 15 years later from the day that I was robbed. And when I got there, as I was driving the car, I could see that the situation in the favela, they haven't changed much. It was still a very underprivileged location, was still without access to water treatment, without the trash in the streets. The situation was still bad. But one thing did change. Now in Brazil, we have almost 400 million smartphone devices. This is almost twice the number of people in Brazil. There are 220 million Brazilians. And the people in the favela, they now have access to smartphones. And that has been able to change their lives a little bit. Thiago Firmino case, this entrepreneur, by having access to these smartphones, which have a computing capacity comparable to what the President of the United States had in the 70s. Now, he became an entrepreneur, and he created a website for enabling people like you and me to come visit the favela that he lives in, Santa Marta. And by doing that, people started visiting, started realizing how bad was the situation there, and then they started donating more. People in the favela, they started cleaning the streets because they were receiving people outside the favela. And suddenly, the environment there was less violent, and their lives became a little better. For me, Thiago Firmino was a great inspiration. He's a great entrepreneur. He did not have any access to education, to resources, but he made it through. He created one solution that, through technology, he actually improved the life of the people in his community. In Brazil, we have 80 million people without access to banking services. We have a very consolidated financial market. In Brazil, regular people like you and me, we are used to pay over 400% interest rates on our credit card lines. 400% a year. So there are 80 million people without access to banking services. They cannot receive their salary because they don't have a bank account. Therefore, they don't pay taxes, and therefore, they are segregated from our capitalist society. And the people who actually have access to, then they get access to very expensive, bureaucratic, and also, in a way, segregated financial services. So, I would just like you to imagine one case, the case of Thiago Firmino, for instance. He's living in Santa Marta, a favela in Brazil. It would take him 2 hours to get to a bank branch in order to open a bank account. When he gets there, the bank manager will ask him, well, I need to see your credit history. I need to see your tax report. I need to see your ID. And for sure, many of these he doesn't have. So it was a 2 hours journey to the bank branch. If he was bearing money, he could even be robbed and lose his entire money or his salary. It's a tough situation. And this is true for almost 40% of Brazilians. So in 2015, I decided to leave the law firm and to open the first peer-to-peer lending platform in Brazil. As we told, we have the biggest spread rate in the world, and there are 80 million people without access to banking services. Why not create a solution enabling the people who have to invest in the financing of those who have not? The people who invest, they can have a better return on their investment while providing social impact. And the people who get the loans, they pay lower interest rate and they get access to the banking industry. By doing that, we were able to impact over 1 million people, and we received 2 billion in loan requests in less than 3 years history. But most of all, what we learned from our experience at Biva was that we were doing more than just a fintech or even a peer-to-peer lending platform. We became a community that was able to empower people's financial lives. People that didn't have access or who never had a bank account or who never got a loan, to enable them to create a company, to realize their dream. Through Biva, they managed to do that, and their lives became a little better. But this situation is not private to Brazil. There are actually 2.4 billion people in emerging countries, emerging economies, that still don't have access to banking services. This represents 62% of the population in emerging markets. I have a strong feeling that it won't be the banks or the traditional financial institutions that are going to solve this issue, nor the technology companies. This is a new market. These people, they are not able to pay high fees. These people have a limited knowledge of how banking works. So for the traditional players or even the technology companies, specific purpose fintechs, it's difficult for them to create a proper solution that fits their needs, that fits the community aspects of their lives. So my suggestion is that it will actually be companies that combines the technology, the financial capacity, through purpose, through a human understanding of the needs of those people that still don't have access to the financial solutions. M-Pesa is a very important case for us. M-Pesa is a company that created this mobile financial solution for the people in Kenya. And now 92% of the population in Kenya have access to banking services, and their lives are now a little better. This is the same for Paytm in India, WeChat in China, Kakao Bank in Korea. And now, after we sold Biva on the verge of Pagseguro IPO in 2018, we created Zen, which is the first financial solution specially designed on the network effect for these 80 million Brazilians that still don't have access to banking services. But most of all, as I look back from my story as a young boy, being robbed, being so afraid, and that line that stood for most of my life between my life and my family, between the people in the favelas, we were able, as a team, to share this dream to impact their lives. We were able to take our bag of resources, our education, our knowledge of banking industry, of technology, the network that we had. And we took this bag of resources and we gave it to the community in our country so as to enable them to empower their financial lives, to create a direct line of access between the people who have in Brazil access to capital and part of the financial industry to the people that still don't have. And by doing so, we were able to make their lives a little better. What I would like to ask you today is, what can you guys do with your own bag of resources, your MBAs here in INSEAD, the network that you are now being able to gather? What can you do to make the people's lives in your country, in your communities, or even in some place that they need? Take your own bag of resources and help the world to make a little better. Thank you.